So, what do the various terms mean? These terms: drowning, fatal drowning, non-fatal drowning, and rescue. These are 4 words that you need to know and know very well so far as this objective is concerned: drowning, fatal drowning, non-fatal drowning, and rescue. So what I'll do is I'm going to talk about the words, and after that we are going to get into a series of questions which will help us to appreciate it very well. So number 1, drowning itself is the process of experiencing respiratory impairment from submersion or immersion in liquid. When we say drowning, that's what it means. Then fatal drowning is a drowning event with a fatal outcome. So a fatal outcome is, it could be death, or it could be that the patient can become a vegetable, okay? Brain dead or something. So please, drowning basically means the process of experiencing respiratory impairment. Remember that word, respiratory impairment from submersion or immersion in liquid. While fatal drowning is a drowning event, that is the process of experiencing respiratory impairment, which will lead to a fatal outcome. Okay, that is fatal drowning. And then we have non-fatal drowning. Doctors, I don't want to move too quickly. I want to take my time. So please follow me carefully, all right? So we learned about drowning. We learned about fatal drowning. And then now we're going to non-fatal drowning. So non-fatal drowning is a drowning event in which the process of respiratory impairment is stopped before death and the victim will survive. Let me say it again. A drowning event in which the process of respiratory impairment is stopped before death and the victim will survive. So when it comes to non-fatal drowning, we have 3 categorizations. Number 1, mild impairment, where the patient will present with breathing, involuntary distressing cough, and the patient is fully alert. Remember that in non-fatal drowning, the patient does not die, the patient survives. But then the non-fatal drowning is broken into 3: mild impairment, moderate impairment, and severe impairment. Doctors, please pay particular attention to these things we are sharing. Okay? Mild impairment, moderate impairment, and severe impairment. So with mild impairment, the patient is breathing, the patient has involuntary distressed coughing, but the patient is fully alert. The moderate impairment, the patient has difficulty breathing. The patient is disoriented, but the patient is conscious. And then in severe impairment, the patient is not breathing and or the patient is unconscious. Doctors, please, I don't want to move fast. Let me know if what I just shared is okay with you, or you want me to go through it again. Non-fatal drowning, there are 3 classifications, because non-fatal drowning basically means that the patient did not die, right? But then it could be that the patient had mild impairment, moderate impairment, or severe impairment. In mild impairment, so basically use these 2 things to differentiate between the 3: the patient, the breathing of the patient, and then the alertness level. In mild impairment, the patient is breathing, okay, and the patient is conscious, but then the patient may have some involuntary cough. In moderate impairment, the patient has difficulty breathing. The patient is disoriented, but the patient is conscious. And in severe impairment, the patient is not breathing, and the patient or the patient is unconscious. The reason I'm saying this is because I've set some questions around this, and I need you to really get this in order to be able to master those questions. And then when we talk about rescue is basically an intervention that prevents progression to drowning in an individual who is submerged but at no time develops respiratory symptoms or impairment. So remember that we said with drowning, there's an effect on the respiration. With rescue, the patient was put in the water all right, but then something came to save the patient. And because of that, the patient did not develop any respiratory symptoms or any impairment. You have to know rescue, drowning, non-fatal drowning, and fatal drowning. And non-fatal drowning, we have three classifications. Okay, so I'm going to give you a set of questions where we are going to go through these definitions, and then you'll be able to tell me whether or not you get it. So, a 7-year-old boy is picked from a swimming pool after being submerged for several minutes. He is conscious, coughing, and breathing normally. How would you classify his drowning event? What is your answer? Is it fatal drowning? Is it non-fatal drowning with mild impairment? Is it non-fatal drowning with moderate impairment? Is it rescue? What is your answer? Let me know. Which of them is the correct answer? Fatal drowning, non-fatal drowning with mild impairment, non-fatal drowning with moderate impairment, and rescue. Which one is the correct answer? So the answer is D. And let me look at the answers people put out here. Let me see. People are saying B. Now, remember the definition of rescue. The question says the boy is picked from a swimming pool after being submerged for several minutes. He is conscious, he's coughing, and he's breathing normally. He's picked. How would you classify this drowning event? He's picked. That's what the question says. The answer is D. Okay. So since the boy did not develop respiratory symptoms or impairment, his event is classified as rescue. That's what I'm saying. These definitions, they look very simple, but in a board exam situation, you want to make sure that you fortified your mind very well. So let's take it again. So those who wrote B, I know you were like, oh, he's conscious, he's coughing, he's breathing normally. But remember, the question says he was picked, he was rescued. Okay, let's go on to this one. Let's try this other question. A 5-year-old girl is brought to the emergency department after being found unconscious in a bathtub. She is not breathing and has no pulse. What is the appropriate classification for this drowning event? Now, I'm sure everybody is going to take their time to yeah, look at the question very well. What is the appropriate classification? Tell me, what's the appropriate classification for this drowning event? What's the appropriate classification? Is it A? Is it B? Is it C? Is it D? Is it, yeah. So the answer is, what did people say? C. The answer is A, fatal drowning. This girl lacks a pulse. This girl is unconscious. Doctors, take your time and really, really get these concepts right. Because you see, we've dropped 2 questions and people are still struggling with it. This patient does not have a pulse. This patient is unconscious. This patient is not breathing. This is fatal drowning. This is fatal drowning. Okay. Next question. A 10-year-old boy is rescued from a lake and brought to the shore by bystanders. He is conscious but disoriented, and he complains of difficulty breathing. How would you classify his drowning event? He is rescued from a lake and brought to the shore by. He's conscious but disoriented. Conscious but disoriented. Don't let the word rescued trick you. He's conscious, but he's disoriented. And he complains of difficulty breathing. How would you classify his drowning event? Conscious, but disoriented. Beautiful. The answer is C. Doctors, how is the exercise going? The answer is C. The answer is C. Non-fatal drowning with moderate impairment. Remember, the boy's difficulty breathing and disorientation classify his drowning event as non-fatal with moderate impairment. Mild impairment means the patient is conscious, the patient is breathing normally, and the patient just has some bouts of cough, if you remember, involuntary cough. But with moderate impairment, they are disoriented and they may have difficulty breathing. And with severe impairment, they may be unconscious. But the reason why the other one we read, we said that the patient had fatal drowning because aside that being unconscious and not breathing well, the patient also did not have a pulse. Doctors, this is how the QE1 is. This is how the QE1 is. And that is why, someone will go, oh, this is drowning. Oh, drowning, easy. You see? Okay, good. Now I have another question for you. A 3-year-old girl is found floating face down in the pool. She's not breathing and is unresponsive. After resuscitation effort, she starts to breathe on her own and becomes fully alert. How will you classify her drowning event? That's why I like the QE1, because it challenges you, right? Challenges you, yeah. And this is not just an issue of reading a book or something. No, you need to think critically through each of these questions. So what is the answer? The answer is a non-fatal drowning with mild impairment. Since the girl becomes fully alert and starts breathing after resuscitation, her event is classified as non-fatal with mild impairment. If it was non-fatal with severe impairment, she would have remained unconscious. She would have remained unconscious, right? She would have remained unconscious. She would not be able to breathe. But because she's now breathing, because she's now conscious, but then she had initially issues with her breathing. So it is non-fatal drowning with mild impairment. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that this particular set of questions, we cut it so that when you are reviewing, you can take your time and review everything one by one. Because for me, I think that's very, very important. So how
Sorry,
was the exercise?
I had a question. If the patient got rescued, it's not going under rescue or no?
No, so with rescue, if you remember, let's go back to rescue. It says an intervention that prevents progression to drowning. And we said that drowning is basically, what was our definition of drowning? The process of experiencing respiratory impairment. So if the person is picked up and the patient did not have any respiratory impairment, that is what we call rescue. But so far as there's any, respiratory impairment, then that means the patient has moved from rescue to drowning or, the non-fatal drowning or fatal drowning. So you have to know where to put the patient then. So
No.
first you have to know and understand the definition of rescue. Then you have to understand the definition of drowning very well.